Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful. And those of you who just joined, you probably just heard that little beep. That was more to remind me. But this webinar is being recorded. So if you do not wish to have your camera on, please do turn that off. And we will be able to share this post the webinar. If you have any questions as we go through, please pop them in the chat box and we will go through those either at the end of the presentation or finish a little between ourselves. So to kick off today, Alison has been kind enough to join us and I'm very excited about this. We've had lots and lots of conversations and I'm going to hand it over to her to talk about her journey and some of the most common forms of neurodiversity. So over to you, Alison. Let's get started.
Thank you, Annalese. Now I'm going to share the screen. This is hopefully going to work nicely from the start. So fingers crossed everyone can see that. Can you give me a thumbs up? Brilliant. Okay. So it is such an honour to be invited to speak with you today around neurodiversity. So if I share my story of neurodiversity and the superpower that I realised that I had later on in life. I'm from Clydebank, which is just outside Glasgow. It's a working class town. It's known for quite a few things: Singer sewing machines, shipbuilding, and my own personal favourite, Marty Pellow from Wet, 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 if you're old enough to remember that. I went to Clydebank High, which was a mainstream school, and I loved the social side of things. We didn't know anything really at this stage. This would have been the early 80s around neurodiversity. But what I did know was I really struggled to read, to write, and retain information. I specifically, vividly remember a few things from school. One was around photosynthesis. I was studying for an O-level in chemistry or biology, whatever it was. And my sister is a straight A student and she could remember everything. And I would study, I'd remember it, we would go for dinner and she would come back and quiz me, and every single piece of information that we had covered pre-dinner had evaporated. And I think people thought, and we look at education at that time, that we were taking the mickey, that we could remember it and we were just being awkward or difficult. I can also remember being in English class where the teacher would make you stand up and read out loud. And like, even as I talk about it now, it physically makes me feel sick, because in a room full of teenagers, 13 to 16, I could read like a 5-year-old, and like the number of times that I had to make excuses to leave the class. Oh, I needed a wee. Oh, I don't feel very well. I need to go to the nurse, because the anxiety of reading out loud was just something that was breaking my heart. And I think, again, at that time, all I could hear was the voice in my head. You're not clever enough. You're not smart enough. You're really stupid. And the voice would be shouting at me every single day. But the worst thing was it was tied in with teachers telling me the same message. So for a long, long time, I just thought I was stupid and thick and just wasn't going to be making anything of my life. But my saving grace was, my mum was a cleaner and my dad worked in the shipyards, and what we were short of in money, we made up for in love and support. So when I came 16, I couldn't stay in education. It wasn't working for me. And my parents said, well, just go and get a job, find something that you really enjoy. You're just not going to be on the dole, as the phrase at that time. And I ended up getting a job in hospitality. So I got a job as a hotel receptionist. And I thought, again, quite naively, that all I had to do all day was say, checking in, checking out, and handing in keys. But what it did give me, it gave me this ability to find my superpowers without knowing anything about neurodiversity, so that I knew that I was really good with people. I knew that I could energize a room. I knew that I could do silver service waitressing. I knew that I could MC weddings. So really those things that I was great at, I focused and I doubled down on. The things like typing the menus, I could manage to get one of my colleagues to do that for me, and all of the things around the written word that I really struggled with, I could manage to work as a team with someone else. I went on then to do hospitality management around the world. I worked for Radisson in Sydney, Southern Suns in Cape Town, Seymour Hotels in Jersey. So taking what I knew that I was good at, I just worked towards that. But this is where it did become a bit tricky, that when I was working for Radisson in Sydney, the general manager at the time needed the standard operating procedure to be rewritten. Now, we know now why I struggled to work on a big text, no computer on this. This was manual writing, that we now know it's because I'm dyslexic, but we didn't know that at that time. And that choice then made me leave the job and leave the country that I'd really worked hard to get to. Whereas I think now with neurodiversity, and I'm going to look at it in this section, like how do you identify that in the workplace? How do you lead people with those superpowers and vulnerabilities on a daily basis? So I came back from traveling and I ended up working in sales for, I think, about 30 years, top performer in corporate sales. I worked for Dow Egberts, the coffee company, BT, and for 15 years I worked for Yellow Pages. And what I then, again, I worked with people who I think sales specifically is a hunting ground for neurodiversity, because a lot of the superpowers that we have are around people and building relationships with people. But what I could see was I had to work and really learn how to do the paperwork, because a lot of my colleagues hadn't embraced that skill. Like, they would leave the paperwork in the boot, the orders wouldn't get processed. And so I could see what was happening to other people, that I could relate to their potential neurodiversity. Again, still of this ilk is never ever diagnosed. So an optician, I know this sounds really bizarre, but I'd seen this optician, looked after their account, and I was struggling to do the manual paperwork, and he said, "You've got dyslexia." And I said, "Have I? What is that? What is this name that you name drop on?" And he said, "It's how your brain thinks and how it functions differently to other people." So at this stage, I then started to do some research on how it worked and why it worked in that way. So it was something I was really interested in. But one of the things I think, again, when you have your diagnosis or when you are working with someone, it's around change. It's around doing things differently. It's around changing the voice in your head and really stopping. For me, it was stopping using it as a crutch to hold me back and actually a superpower to drive me forward. So I was in a room in Bristol and the CEO of the company was there, and he was talking about print media and this Google thing will never catch on. So I couldn't work for a company that believed that Google would never catch on, because it had already caught on by this stage. So I decided that I'd set up my own company. So this was in 2013, 2014, when it went into incorporation. And it was all going well. I always had a team around me who could support the things I wasn't great at. But there was funding that the government provided. And when the government pulled the funding, again, I was thrust into a space of change, which threw my little neurodiverse head into self-doubt. So I've got a friend called Lorraine. So anytime I need information, I call on Lorraine. And I phone Lorraine and I said, "What am I going to do now?" And she said, "That's really easy. You're going to write a book." I can even feel that feeling in my stomach now when I think, I'm not good enough, I'm not clever enough, I can't write a paragraph, I'm really stupid, I can't do this. Anyway, I'm so glad I persevered with that book. And I think this is where really helping you to adapt your skills and be able to see them as strengths. Because the first book, Secrets of Successful Sales, went on to be an Amazon #1 around the world, a W.H. Smith top 10 business book. And in 2019, The Independent voted it one of the top business books written by a woman. So the fact that the neurodiversity or the dyslexia wasn't even mentioned in that just gave me that strength to believe. I then wrote the second book, Smash It, The Art of Getting What You Want. And then during that time, it was written during COVID, the MBE arrived. And then you can see what I've done from them. So as I talk about neurodiversity. I am not a doctor. I am not a qualified professional. What I'm talking from is my own experience working with other people, and research that I have done on how you can help lead your team. So if there's any really difficult questions, I might not be the right person to answer them because I am not a doctor. So one of the things I think really helped me to be able to be a better reader is bionic reading. So if you can adapt to bionic, so even now your brain reads faster than your eyes. Bionic reading works by highlighting the initial. I can read, like I found a skill that actually helps me to be able to read. So we've put the presentation together in bionic reading for anybody that this is of benefit to. So I think now if you watch TikTok or Instagram or look at anything, we hear neurodivergent, neurodiverse, neurotypical. You know, we've really started to adapt into this as a way of life and a way of language. But according to the statistic from the University of Edinburgh, 1 in 7 people have the superpower of neurodiversity. So I think that it's now, I think it's our time to shine. I think it's been embraced by big organizations. So things like, I know the EY are massive, and like some of the big 4 accountancy firms actually go out there to recruit people with neurodiversity and take it as that superpower, looking at the strengths that people have rather than the weaknesses that hold people back. So what is it though? It's the concept that the human brains are naturally come in diverse forms. And I think it's always been the case, but I think now, instead of it being oh, you're really thick, you're easily distracted, you can't read, you're really stupid, it's like, wow, you can bring problem solving to the equation, you can bring building relationships, you can build, you know, that structure in organizations. We now see all the positives rather than the negatives. So there are lots of different types, you know, from Tourette's and you know, like lots. And again, this is all available on the NHS website, but the 4 most common ones are ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. I think that's how you pronounce that again. Really struggled with that one. So let's have a wee look at the superpowers and vulnerabilities of the top 4, really. So if we look at ADHD, the superpowers, creative, come up with amazing ideas, problem solvers, because they don't see things as a roadblock. They can always find a way around. Like I lost my phone. I was at the races on Friday and I lost my phone, and I was like, well, I've always got iCloud and I've got my laptop in my bag, whereas sometimes people without the superpowers would be panicking they'd lost their phone. Innovators, we know that there are a lot of innovators, from Elon Musk, Richard Branson, people who create things and tend to be sociable. Again, you know, good from a networking perspective. Vulnerabilities, quite easily distracted, impulsive, quite impatient, and quite inattentive. So again, coming back to the school environment, people would have focused on, they were the class disruptors. They wanted to talk, they wanted to join in, couldn't sit on their chair for 2 minutes. You know, we see that as negatives, but during the time when I was educated, nobody could see that superpower. You know, we now know Stephen Bartlett talks about his ADHD really openly, and I believe do a lot of people, because I think really it's something we would be ashamed of. Now it's something we're really proud of. But how do you identify that? Because obviously we're looking at how you lead in the workplace. Fidgeting, a lot of fidgeting goes on. Interrupting because their head's ready to bounce in with that idea. 100 tabs open because they're not getting anything finished. And over talking because the idea's there, they've got to get it out, got to get it out. So if you are leading a team with someone with ADHD in there, how do you adapt your behaviours? So again, give them short-term goals. You know, you see, coming back to the standard operating procedures, if I'd have been given, like, just write 1 chapter at a time, just amend these and we'll type it up for you, I would probably have bounced through that, no problem at all. Make it engaging. So again, it's fun.
Have we lost you, Alison? Yes, I think we have. Okay, we'll give her just a second. Technical glitches, eh? Who'd have thought that would happen in today's world? Let's just give her a few seconds. I will drop her a quick message just so she's not continuing to tell us all these wonderful things and we can't hear her. Let me drop her a note. Oh, she'll be back. Well, we can talk while we're waiting anyway. But yeah.
I'm back.
Oh, she's back. Wonderful. There you go.
You can tell that happened when I was talking about ADHD, can't you? I got easily distracted. I went somewhere else. Let me share the screen again. I don't know what happened there. Right, okay, so we're back here. So I was talking about the scaling questions. So if you are leading somebody with ADHD, rather than saying, how are you doing with this? And they'll say, fine, use the scaling. So coming back to the standard operating procedures, if my boss had said, if 1 means you are struggling with this, you really can't get it done, and 5 means you've finished it already, where are you on this? And what can we help lead to this outcome that's great for both of us? So those kind of scaling questions really help to stay on focus with those short-term goals. Autism is one of the other top 4. The superpowers, they are reliable, precise, problem solvers, and good memory. Now, I think it's really important as we talk about the top 4 that there's a spectrum. So some people can be slightly autistic and some people can be massively. So we never label like we wouldn't for any other diversity inclusion. You know, this is not a weapon. And it's important that you know that it comes from different, you know, ranges of from mild to not so mild. Vulnerabilities. A lot of the times with autism, it's the social cues, the social skills. They don't pick up on that because they're thinking literally. Empathy, communication, and self-expression. So again, sometimes it's that multitasking that a lot of the times people with autism are so deep in thought that to be able to multitask and show any of these facial expressions and empathy is just a task too much. And Annalese and I were talking about this because we know that Elon Musk is autistic, but I must say, you may or may not know who this is, but it's Fern Brady, and she is an amazing Scottish comedian and author. And I think the way she describes it in her audiobook to me just really nailed, you know, that what it's like to be autistic. Because this is something, again, I'm not talking through experience, I'm talking through Fern's experience. But again, it's that multitask, sometimes so deep in thought that may struggle to smile. Take things literally. So if you say to somebody, and Fern talks about this in the book about break a leg, she's literally like, why would they want to break a leg? Why are they breaking that leg? So again, it's that literal thinking. Sometimes again, poor social cues. So not picking up on the non-verbal language which we would use, because we know a high percentage of our communication is non-verbal and likes routine. So as soon as you change it, and again, you know, things like even from a food routine, I know people with autism that have got to have porridge for breakfast, and if they have something else, it really throws them off balance. But how do you adapt if you are leading someone with autism? So less non-verbal cues, make sure that you're given structured, do A, B, C, and D, don't leave anything to chance. Again, sometimes depending on the level of autism, less touch. If you are someone who's touchy-feely, the fact that if it's someone with autism, they don't want to be touched, double check that with them without barging in and being the cuddler. Quiet environment, so again, to think and know the facts, because sometimes, again, if you've got it wrong and you're having that conversation and they know the facts, it can become quite a long-winded conversation, which becomes a bit of a battle. So again, when you're having that conversation, make sure you know those facts. Dyslexia, which I can talk about firsthand. Superpowers, we're creative. We see a big picture. We are great problem solvers and we think in pictures. So I recently did a TEDx, which was 18 minutes long with no notes. Whoa, that is so tough. So what I have to do is write it in words, which I know that I won't remember, translate it into pictures and then remember the pictures in my head. So I can, if you watch my TEDx, I think I smashed it, but I had to learn it all in pictures. Vulnerabilities, not good at reading, memory, multitasking, and keeping time. And it's interesting because one of the things that I've had to learn is to keep time. So you can see, like, for anybody that the girls saw this, so I've got 10 minutes, 30 seconds left. So really, and I talk about Alison Edgar's big balls to keep me in track, like I've got an empty inbox. So there are coping strategies. What I think it's hard to see is when people use their vulnerabilities as an excuse and bring that to the forefront, that I think it's focusing really on those superpowers. And Lucy Bronze, the England player, she's also got the superpower. How do you identify it? Learning pictures, struggle to read, confuse words, do that all the time. And how do you adapt? Again, create, if you need somebody to learn something, help them work with the pictures, avoid heavy text, oral communication, and be concise. So again, try and keep things concise so that they will remember them. And then our fourth friend, the superpowers of dyscalculia, creative. Again, there's a lot of creative. We know the left brain and the right brain, communication, great problem solvers. They think in pictures, but the vulnerability, mental maths. So coming back to education, when I was at school, the times table, no matter how much I practiced, no matter how much I tried, no matter how much I tried to work out in the till what the change would be from £1 if it was £2.24 or whatever, you know, that mental maths is a vulnerability for a lot of people. Whereas for some of the people who were in the top 4, it's one of their superpowers. Reading numbers, sometimes they get them mixed up, symbols, and then attention to detail. So the one that we found is Cher, one of my favourites. I use her a lot as an example because people say, oh, if only I'd have done this, if only I'd have done that. And I go, but you're not Cher. You can't turn back time. You've got to go forward and look at those positive things. How do you identify it in the workplace? Can be slow processing. Maths anxiety. So again, when you ask somebody to work out numbers, they're like, oh, I'm not good at numbers. I don't like numbers. Confusion with numbers, finger counting. But how do you adapt? So make sure you break it down. Make sure you make it visual around the numbers. And maybe sometimes, again, if you can help share the load, if you know that that's somebody's vulnerability, we know for a fact it's going to be someone's superpower. And oral communication. So I think that gives a bit of an overview, especially from the leadership perspective. And I love this. So we know that, I mean, we think about Albert Einstein as just being the biggest genius ever. Like, we just think that, you know, he was the king of creating all these things, but he had a lot of the superpowers: ADHD, autism, and dyslexia. And I do absolutely love this phrase: everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So I think, again, giving people confidence, that's one of the things, especially for younger people in a workplace, is how do we build that confidence with people who have got that? Because if you feel like you're stupid, it's old school. The world has changed a lot since I was educated. So when it comes back to leadership, I do behavioural training around DISC and how people think. And one of the things is for leadership, you know, if we know for a fact, if I'm in a big room and I say, put your hand up if you were brought up to treat other people how you want to be treated, like most hands go up. But actually, when it comes to leading people with the superpowers, then actually lead them how they want to be treated. So it's about that adaptation. And also, I believe if you know what your vulnerabilities are, it's about you adapting as well. And something I think, you know, is not my area of expertise, but we know as females, as women, that masking is one of the bigger things that we see because we copy other people. But when you strip back, that actually we still do have the superpowers and vulnerabilities, but we try to mask to be like other people. Again, Fern Brady talks a lot about it in her book, which I would highly recommend. But we know diversity drives innovation. If we look at some of the, you know, the things that we use in our life every single day, and people that come up with these inventions every single day, that they tend to have the superpowers that we have. So I think that I'm going to do, I think there's a bit of Q&A for me, is what I'm thinking, and then we go into panel. But if anybody does, I'm on all of the social medias. I'm on LinkedIn under Alison Edgar MBE, and on Instagram at the Alison Edgar MBE. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can pick up on the Q&A and the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alison. That was it's great. It was really insightful from my perspective, and some of the things that you said in there are just resonate quite heavily. I think that treat other people how you want to be treated thing is something that I was brought up to do. And I was talking to Suzie about this yesterday, and it's actually, we both disagree with that statement. Suzie was quite rightly put me back in my box yesterday when I came out with that, and sort of said, actually, you know, some people who are potentially self-critical wouldn't necessarily go out and critique other people. So it is just about kind of feeding on that behavior of somebody, regardless of whether they're neurodiverse or otherwise, treating them exactly how they want to be treated. But yeah, there's loads of really interesting takeaways from my perspective, and I feel like I've looked into this a lot recently. So it's been quite a learning curve. Really has, and I obviously work quite closely with Jade. So Jade is on with us today, and I've known you for what, just under 5 months, I think, Jade.
Yeah, you just started with this January, wasn't it?
Yeah, I joined in January, and you've been with the company for about 6-7 months, I think. So we're both still fairly new in the business, but we have quite a good little team there. And one of the things that jumped out at me when I was looking at this presentation was that 1 in 7 stat. So in Jade's team, there are 7 people, and Jade is ADHD. And again, just before I kind of jump in and start asking you questions, Jade, that statement that I just made there actually came from speaking to Suzie and yourself, Alison, of somebody doesn't have ADHD. They are that person. It's not something that you've caught. It's not a cold or a sore throat. That is who you are, and it's another personality type, is the way that I see it. We can have somebody who's introverted, extroverted, someone who's ADHD. It's another one of those realms of personalities. But yeah, so Jade, talk us through kind of your journey and how you were diagnosed with ADHD, and how, I suppose, pretty much the same as Alison, you were told you were too loud, too chatty at school, like lots of people.
Yeah. So I actually was diagnosed with hyperactivity when I was 2 years old. Hyperactivity now is ADHD. You don't just get a diagnosis of hyperactivity anymore. It does fall under attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is part and parcel of how females present with ADHD. However, being born in the 90s, it being 1995, when my mum took me to the doctors, it was very unlikely that they were going to actually understand that a female could have a neurodivergence like a male could have autism or ADHD quite present. Females do associate differently when presenting their side effects of the condition as such. So I didn't actually get diagnosed officially with ADHD until I was 25. And then as of Friday, I've also been diagnosed with high functioning autism, which is very, very understanding. Actually, after understanding myself, and the reason I kind of pushed back is when I originally got my diagnosis, I got diagnosed with combination. Having met a number of people with combination, I felt that I presented very, very different to the females that I'd met with the condition. So I spent the last 3 years going through diagnosis for high functioning autism, which would essentially be categorized as Asperger's a few years back. That has now been completely ruled off, and you are now classed as high functioning autism. So although I have the impulsivity of someone with ADHD, I don't have exactly the same as Suzie, presents different. I don't do well in social situations. I go very introverted in those situations, whereas Suzie is an extrovert, so will present differently, which is where the differences kind of come into play. So actually having that ready for this call, which is just bizarre, actually helps me really understand myself a lot better, because we've spent the last 5 years kind of getting to traps with who I am as opposed to what I have.
Yeah. So you got more superpowers.
Yes, but it makes a lot of sense, because I like being in a quiet space. I lack social skills. I over talk, so it has that complete contradiction. So I need to get it out there as typically with ADHD, you have to just get it out there. And then I have that all of the time. I over talk on people all of the time, and it's not me being rude. It is just how my brain works. It just needs to come out there and then. But then going into the social dynamics and going into work events and having the sickness in the morning and the real overwhelming anxiety of going into that social dynamic, and also the sensory overload of all of the noises, which is a massive autistic trait. So it's a massive learning curve for, actually, maybe I wasn't as ADHD as I thought, but when I do look at the diagnosis that I got when I was 25, it is literally just a list of personality traits, and the questioning was about how I responded to things,
but less about the sensory stuff that you've kind of experienced as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, this leads really well into a group question, really. And I think, given that we're trying to help support teams and managers and individuals in the work environment, I think lots of companies think they have to throw a lot of money to support individuals with neurodiversity. You know, it takes a team to make changes, or to have somebody come into their team that needs these changes. It's going to cost them time and money and resource. My question really is how do we think that small changes that employers could make to make that more accessible to somebody with a neurodiversity? So Jade, you talked about the noise element and going into the office. And again, this is just to the group, like, what do we all think that employers could do to offer different solutions to these things?
Can I jump in first on that one? Because I think there's a hidden secret that most organisations don't know about, especially small businesses, and it's the government's access to work scheme. So if somebody has been diagnosed in, like, so say for example, Jade needs noise cancelling headphones to work from, well, the government will provide, there we go, they will provide those for you. Like the software, like, so say it's Otter AI, or I've got on my laptop, I've got Fiona. So she just reads everything back to me in Scottish. So the words that I would miss, but there is access out there, access to work, and you just apply for it, and then people would be able to, you know, so it doesn't have to be an expensive or a big change. I think also as part of the program, you can have a coaching, like a neurodiverse coaching. So there's loads of stuff, but it seems to be the worst hidden, or the best hidden secret in the world. Nobody knows anything about it. So
I'd never heard of it until Suzie mentioned it to me yesterday.
Yeah.
Sorry to come in there. So it's the best thing since sliced bread that came into my life, if I'm being honest. Access to work. Yeah, there's so many people that don't realize that they qualify for it, and it is going through that process, but it is totally worth it. I've got my standing desks as well. I can't sit still, you know. So, and like, it's simple things like that that really help. It's not just the equipment side, but even a support worker with that extra admin and everything else. Yeah
I mean, I think you nailed it on the head there. Is actually, these things are out there and they're just not talked about. So if you do have somebody in your team, then, you know, that's something that you can access as a resource.
I think it's a bit of a stigma as well, sorry, just as to why people maybe don't look at it. Like, it was very difficult for me to admit I am disabled. When I got my diagnosis about 2 years ago, come August. So, you know, trying to wrap my head around that, and that I needed extra support in different ways for different things after I had, you know, gone 33 years in my life. It was like really bizarre. So it was a bit of it was a personal thing. I think a lot of people maybe don't look for that because they see it as it's like being on the dole. It's nothing to do with being on the dole. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think go on, Jade.
I was going to say, I've had my diagnosis now for nearly 6 years, and I didn't even know that was a thing. It just comes from working with companies, I suppose, that maybe aren't so open to it from past experience, and not being open to even just flexible working and stuff like that. Companies that just stuck in old school traditional ways of working rather than moving into 2024.
Well, that's why I think for you, Jade, as well, that hybrid style of working works really well for you.
Yeah, I think when I'm on reflection of like previous jobs and maybe why I've not stayed in them for so long is because of having to get up and go into an office every day, and sometimes it is a real struggle, as per the comments I made earlier. Sometimes getting up and going into that social dynamic is really overwhelming, so it's not something that can just be done every day. So having the option to just, if I decide that I don't want to go in the office when I wake up, having that option just makes me not take sick days, makes me more present in the office, be able to actually get on with my job, and having that relationship with your manager, just to have that little bit of flexibility, and understanding that, yes, that you are going to have to be present for work events and be in the office sometimes. You can't always be at home, but just having that little bit of a respite to be able to do that just makes you more proactive in your job as well, I think.
Yeah.
Annalese, were you wanting to know, sorry, just back to your initial question there, is this about removing any sort of like bias towards the recruitment process that you were wanting?
I think, like you say, I suppose that access thing, you know, making it accessible, there could be a bias there of actually we may not want to recruit somebody who is ADHD and neurodiverse because we don't have these things in place, therefore we've got to do something. And that is a question I throw to you, Suzie, is as a recruiter,
Well, I was actually, but I was actually going to go back to, because I think there's going to be a lot of leaders on this webinar today that might be thinking, Jesus Christ, I don't know if I have anybody on my team that's neurodiverse, because nobody's ever actually told me, hi, I'm ADHD, or hi, I'm neurodiverse, or I might think I am. So that's a massive thing. It's great that like we can go to our employers and say, look, actually, I need a bit of support with this. But what about it, Annalese? What if you had a team that's not as brave as Jade to come to you and say, actually, I need support with X, Y, and Z? What do leaders out there, employers out there, and hiring managers do out there right now? Because I know we mentioned this a few weeks ago, to be able to support their neurodivergent employees and staff without saying, oh, do you think
without putting that label on that individual. I think it's about recognizing what Alison's quite clearly put on that screen is identifying and adapting, but just doing it naturally. So not making it so that, you know, everybody has access to a screen filter if they want one. Everybody has access to a breakout space in the office if they need it or need some quiet focus time. But just making it part of your culture, I think, is really important.
Totally right. And that leads me on to, okay, so because you
say that saying you said yesterday, please say it.
Well, is it about the fish?
It is.
Right. So like Annalese did ask me there throughout the week, how do we ensure we remove any sort of biasness towards any sort of neurodivergent people throughout the recruitment process? Now, this is a massive question, I feel, because there's so many different things that we could put into play from, you know, from your initial, what you're putting out there. Have you put a neurodivergent statement on your website? Are you saying, yes, we want to attract these different types of brains? If not, you are losing out on talent. I will tell you right now. So like for starters that, but then we could look into job specs and job descriptions, and everybody's got a different learning style. Me personally, attention to detail. If you're my candidate that's ever had the pleasure of being represented by me, or a client that's ever had the pleasure of me helping you, my attention to detail sometimes is just, it's more about the feeling, the empathy, the person, okay? So like you're going to have people out there with different learning styles, so job specs, all that kind of stuff. So we could look at all of that and we could talk about that till the cows come home. However, where does this stem from? Okay, who can take control of this right here, right now? And who has been taking control of this in like small businesses, big businesses, and your big, huge corporate ones for how many years? The leaders, the CEOs and the MDs and those hiring managers really, really, really need to start training themselves, opening their eyes in the nicest way possible to different types of brains, okay? And you should have neurodivergent thoughts in your recruitment process from the initial, what are we putting out here as a company, as a potential employer? Because the first thing anyone's going to look at now, Alison talked about it, TikTok, Facebook, all of these social medias, what is your business putting out? It does not matter if you're a one-man band or a one-woman band or whatever it is. Like, what do you believe in? What are your core values? And are you inclusive of not just diverse people, but neurodivergence too? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And there's so many small things, isn't it? Like you said, that, you know, being open and transparent about that company statement, having, you know, job specs written in that bionic reading, Alison. I've actually installed an add-on to my Chrome this weekend, and actually it helps me whiz through stuff. And I've never knew something like that. And that's free. That's an extension on Google that your team can install when they're online, when they're reading documents, that just help them skim through it. And, you know, again, just kind of bouncing it back through to recruitment process as well. It's like, it's deemed that if you go to an interview, if you've got a strong handshake, you've got good eye contact, that it's a strong interview, when actually being aware of these different things will mean that that's irrelevant.
Yeah, sorry to just put in there. So hiring managers will bring biases into their recruitment process, especially if we're relying way too much on a face-to-face interview here. Do you know, like I've actually had in my 12 years of doing this, candidates been turned down because of the lack of eye-to-eye contact. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if that was somebody inside somebody's house valuing, I can understand that, okay? Because that's building that trust. This person was being interviewed for a back office, admin, you know, like, know what you're recruiting for, and then you can sort of prevent the biases. Does that make sense? They weren't going to be working on eye-to-eye contact to close a sale here. It was totally something different. And they're information processors, actually, do you know? So missing out on very good talent once again.
Yeah, and also you sort of talked about that creativity, the tech space as well. You know, there's a lot of neurodiverse people working within the tech space. It's growing, fintech, you know, prop tech, you know, all these different things. Obviously I'm prop tech, so I'm a little bit biased. I'm kind of a mix of fin and prop. But, you know, just bringing them into your business to look at problem solving. You know, you're looking for direct to consumer ways to get to market. They can creative, they can problem solve, they can do loads of research, they can hyper focus, and something I want to lean into there, and something I've heard quite a lot about. And Jade, I know we've talked about this as well previously, of kind of, you know, where you go from that, the superpowers to the vulnerabilities, and bouncing between those. So maybe we can talk about those.
So for those of you that follow me on LinkedIn, know I share quite a lot about my personal experiences with ADHD, because being older and learning to understand it, and also being an older female where a lot of people now are having the diagnoses, I think it's also important to share the downsides, and not just everything is amazing and having ADHD is fantastic, because there are some massive detriments that come with it. And one of those for me is that I always need to be busy. And if I've had a sensational week at work and I've been literally on fire doing demos every day, presenting to multiple companies 3 or 4 times a day, and then it comes to Friday and I sit there and I go, okay, I've got nothing going on this weekend. And then I get really overwhelmed, because I know that I'm going to be alone in my own head. With Alison mentioned earlier, when someone with ADHD typically is working, they have 100 browser tabs open in their internet browser. I have that in my head all of the time. It's the only way I can actually describe what is going on in my brain all of the time. So having something to channel into. So I'm a DJ aside from work. My music is everything I decide of me channeling my lack of wanting to think, I guess. It goes into music. And usually on a normal weekend I would have an event to go and do, or a day event to go and see to, or friends to meet up with, but there's obviously seasonal with the music industry as well. So there are certain times of year that I go up and down, and it will come to a Friday afternoon and I'll sit there and I'm like, I've actually got nothing to do. And then I'm like, I now know I'm going to be on my own in my head for the next 2 days with all of these thoughts running around. And I literally get to the Sunday and I just want to run head first into a brick wall. So yes, it's great having it, but there are also those sides that come with it. And it's just learning how to channel it away from work or pre-arranged plans. And I'm lucky that my partner's great with things like this, and he recognizes the signs and does something spontaneous for us of a weekend. But it's not always an option. So it is, it's really just trying to learn how to have a healthy work-life balance, because I do find that I put everything into work and use my superpowers in a work stance, and then leave myself to kind of diffuse afterwards.
And on the flip side of that, you have that burnout as well. So when you have these really big bursts of energy, or Jade, when you have these hyper-focused moments, and so I'm going to flip it over to Suzie in a second, because again, from a different perspective, as a, you know, a business owner, single mum, you know, social butterfly that we all know that you are, Suzie. You know, we all experience burnout at some point, don't we? In our lives, whether that's burning the candle at both ends and going out on a school night, or just taking on too much at work. So from a neurodiverse perspective and balancing that out, Suzie, how do you kind of manage that burnout? And if you were talking to a manager about an employee that also has that as well, how would we deal with it?
Oh God, right. Okay, so when I was like, and still do manage people or lead, I hate the word manage. Sorry, lead.
Lead.
Yeah, so it's all about, it's downtime. Like people need to switch off. Me personally, I've found a lot of meditation. Like I need meditation in my life, and I do. And I go back to grounding myself and just getting out in nature. I know that sounds like really simple, but actually it's not, because even talking to the likes of you, Jade, you know, you on a weekend going out and for a nice walk and just being able to sit there like as well and enjoy nature is very difficult for our brains. So I don't want to dip it. So I do, and that actually is major for me with my brain. It really helps my nervous system, and there's loads of research out there, folks, loads, that it honestly. So I do wild dipping, swimming, whatever you want. I don't swim, I dip, and it's, you know, it's for.
We're not advocating ice baths in the office though, are we? Let's
No,
just say that.
No. But here, yeah, and look here, I know this sounds funny, but I took this from a book called I Don't Want to Be an Empath Anymore, because over 2 years ago when I was going through what I was going through, I didn't know what was going on with myself. So it made sense to me. This is before my diagnosis. I was overstimulated. My sensors were so overstimulated. So I have to shut myself away. I know that sounds really bizarre because Annalese knows I'm a social butterfly, but honest to goodness, when I shut down, I shut down. It's like, leave me alone. And I just want peace. To rebuild my energy back up. I actually just did it there at the weekend, by the way. Yeah. So it feels good. So that's what I do to get that balance. And I promote it. Like in your one-to-ones, guys, in your one-to-ones, if you have a sneaky suspicion that somebody on your team may potentially be neurodiverse, but obviously they've not disclosed it to you, some people don't even know they are, it's recognizing, go on a training session. There's loads out there on Google these days that you don't have to become a doctor or an expert, but you can start being that emotional, intelligent leader that cares, and they can see different things and adapt. That's our jobs as leaders, by the way. That is our job as a leader, whether you're a hiring manager, whether you lead one person, whether you lead yourself. Our job is to become emotionally intelligent and tune in to our people so we can actually lead them. Yeah.
Powerful. That was it. Yeah.
There's some really good questions in there.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to do, is jump into the questions, because we've got just over 10 minutes and I think there's been some real food for thought in here. So yeah, let's have a look into the questions. So first of all, we had Nicola, what should employers and managers do to support their teams in terms of actionable insights from today? What's everybody's thoughts? Alison, we'll go start with you.
I mean, I think it's confidence is one of the things, and because we know that, like, I'm a leader, and we know that my superpowers and vulnerabilities, but what I see in the workplace, because I'm advising, not on this topic, but I'm advising like some of the Fortune 500 and some of the biggest organizations in the world, and people use their vulnerabilities as an excuse. Oh, I'm not very good at that spelling. So, and we are judged. I don't care what anybody says. If you get an email and the words are missing or it's not right, you can't turn around and go, oh, it's because I've got dyslexia. There's so many tools out there to be able to help yourself. So I think it's educating people on, like, you are judged, you know, you are, like, and it's interesting because before we came on today, I was thinking, like, and I had to check with my team, do I use my vulnerabilities as an excuse to hold me back? And again, on a completely different tangent, I'm also in my 50s, so there's also a lot of talk about another thing that physically happens. And And I get sick of people going, oh, I can't do that because I've got brain fog. I can't do this because I've got that. It's your responsibility to live your best and happiest life, and it's how to use those coping strategies. But the number of times I go on calls or I go in meetings and people are going, oh, oh, I can't do this because this, and it's all over the media as well. Like there's a specific Radio 2 DJ that does my head in because she talks about this stuff and uses it as an excuse. And if she's using it as a role model and as an excuse, then everybody uses it as an excuse. And we know the difference between neurotypical and neurodiverse. And a lot of times they're looking for excuses to make you feel stupid. And if you're putting a spelling mistake out or you're, going, oh, I can't do that because I've got this, then I think it's listening to your team, but you have to be the role model as a leader that don't use that against yourself. There's enough people trying to pull you down without pulling yourself down.
Yeah.
So giving people that confidence and saying, right, okay, so we know what your vulnerabilities are. What coping strategies can we put in place? And how can we make that work? So again, coming back to what Jade was saying, she's already putting her personal coping strategies in so that she doesn't go up and down with her mind because it's like, oh my God, it's been so busy. It's been amazing. Oh, now I'm through the floor because I've got nothing to do. And I think it's really working with your team to preempt these things and have the coping strategies in place because you will be judged. We know it. We know that it's 1 in 7, but you still get another 6 out there that are not like people that are neurodiverse, and they are still using it as a barrier and a weapon against people who are like us or like me.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable that you say. It's about having those tools available, having that confidence to have that discussion if somebody wants to talk to you about their neurodiversity or thinks that they may be neurodiverse. And I think from Susie's statement, which she did make to me of a fish stinks from...
I was trying to come in and say it.
Go on.
No, but what Alison's saying there, it comes back once again to our leaders, okay? So, Nicola, what should employers and managers do to support their teams in terms of actionable insights following this meeting? Go and educate yourselves. Educate every single hiring manager or any manager that's got any sort of decision capacity or implementation in that business. Why? Because the fish stinks from the head down. And whether that's really good or whether that fish stinks really bright, it's up to us leaders. It's up to us managers. Call it what you want. It doesn't really, team leaders even, everybody should be on that same page. It's not just about neurodivergence. You do it if it was diversity, if it was inclusive of, gay people, all of this stuff. Like, why is this topic different? So it's just coming back to processes. That fish from the very top, whether there's 1, 2 or 3, but it's being on the same wavelength, going out and educating yourself. I actually listened to a really good podcast yesterday. Ed Thompson, he's the CEO and founder of Optimize. They seem to be a leader in the corporate neurodiversity world for training. I need to do a little bit of more research on that, but like he made a very good point on it is our leaders, it is our managers, and things come down from the top level. So whatever way that we want to incorporate this, used to be talent acquisition and HR managers that used to talk about just talent in general and making that a priority. It's our leaders, it's our CEOs, it's our MDs these days, because one, attracting talent is hard enough as it is, and retaining it is even harder. 1 in 3 people leave a business per year just off their own accord because they want to go and find something better. So yeah, and then these neurodivergent people like ourselves, it's the same thing. So there was a really good one from Amy there, but I'll throw it back to yourselves.
Okay, and I think you covered it. It's about inclusion, and inclusion includes neurodiversity
and education.
It isn't just about equality for gender, equal rights, for things like that. It's about making it the whole thing, the whole spectrum. It should be, everybody should understand it. Managers should be empowered to go and read these resources, be given these resources as part of their induction into a business.
We've gone on about mental health in the workplace for how many years now? Do you know? It's all interrelated. So it's and you have these champions of mental health. So it's the same principle. We need to include, I spoke to a trainer that I just placed there recently, and she's amazing. And she won't mind me saying this. She's ADHD as well. That business will have one of the best trainers in the UK. Why? Because of her neurodiversity and how she can see things.
Yeah.
You know, Jade's agreeing, but other neurotypicals might be like, why are you saying that? Go do your research. It's what you find out, it'll be amazing. Yeah.
And I'm gonna mask Amy's question now because we've got 4 minutes left, and I really want to make sure we give this one time. So Amy's asked, hi, is at Savile, so hi Amy. How would we go about finding out if a candidate might be neurodivergent? How would you get tested to see if you are neurodivergent? So two very different questions there. So I think Jade, do you want to go with the how you get tested one? Is that what you were going to go with?
Yeah, I was also going to just say it's really important as well that it's not about you finding out if that candidate's neurodivergent. They should either know themselves and tell you, but you cannot tell somebody that they may be neurodivergent without actually knowing the facts. Because they may present in one or two of the ways that Alison's shown earlier, but that might not be the characteristics of that said person all of the time. It might just be how they're playing up at work.
Don't diagnose, basically.
Don't diagnose. Be aware of the team and your surroundings, but do not diagnose that person unless they've come to you and said that they think they may have it.
And I've really struggled with that, I'm going to be honest, over the past, since, I've keeping a lid on that is difficult because you're like, oh my God, you're like me.
The difference is, Suzie, is you have a neurodivergent, so you can recognize the signs, whereas somebody that's neurotypical will see those list of personality traits and assume that that person may well fit into that category because they present in one or two of those ways. And although it's important to have the knowledge and know, it's important that we're also not telling people that they're neurodivergent because they may not be.
Now, Amy Scammell-Webb, sorry, I just love this first question, and I can't believe we've only 2 minutes left. I hired Savile. How would somebody go about finding out if a candidate might be neurodivergent? Now, come to me, Amy. No, I'm joking. What I want, this is a really interesting one. So I've been absolutely obsessed. I did a psychology degree when I was 18, 19. Yeah, down in Manchester Met. Anyways, what's the point in this? I did a psychology degree and I never believed that everything comes from the brain, okay? I was like, no, it's society. This is why I am who I am, it's society. Fast forward, I'm 35 now, diagnosed 2 years ago. I'm like, no. It's all genetic. It's all genetic. It's all biological. So how would we go about finding out? I have become obsessed with my insights and my colors, my energy colors, my disc profiling, and I've actually introduced persona profiling into Harte Consulting just because I love my discs and my different colors. Now, I'm yet to know this, and I'm going to throw this back to Alison, because I know you're into your energy colors too. I still don't know till this day. I can have a very good hazard a guess when it comes to the ADHD side and what energy colors we sort of typically fall into. But oh my goodness, then you've got the autistic and it's very confusing. So
yeah.
We've got less than 30 seconds, so this is not going to give it the airtime that it needs, I don't think. Go on, Alison.
I'll get in quick because it's a question I think all the time, because there's so many traits from the red, the blue, the green and the yellow that actually fit in. But what I would say is labeling is the biggest thing that you shouldn't be doing. And it naturally in my head, I go, right, well, that's a yellow red, because that's the stuff that I teach in the books and that's the stuff that I talk about. But exactly what Jade says, you cannot put people in a box, and you cannot, without a proper diagnosis, do that. But mentally, I do exactly the same thing, Suzie. I just don't ever verbalize it because it's not fair. You can't do that. It doesn't work like that.
And I really find that psychometric testing, just coming back to removing the biasness, stop using it when you're interviewing in your process. Use it when you're serious about somebody. You've offered them, they've accepted, they're ecstatic to start. And guess what? That great leader now wants to understand that colour energy and what they lead by in a work capacity. Actually, it shows you a hell of a lot of outside of work as well, because that emotional connection too, you're going to get the best out of them. So use it then to manage that person, regardless if they're neurodivergent or not.
I think, like you say, personality profiling is absolutely something, Amy, and you can definitely ask every candidate if you can make any adjustments. I think that's the question we should be asking anyway, regardless of neurodiversity, is can I make any adjustments for you in the interview? And they may then come back to you and say, actually, yes, could I get it written in a different format? Could I, have certain adjustments to come and meet with you? Could it be in a quieter location, not a busy office? So you might get a feel of that without actually asking directly if they are one of these wonderful people that are on the call with us today. We're going to have to wrap it up now, Suzie, because we are done. I can see it burning away.
There was another question there, and I'm like, sorry.
I was just going to say to Amy, if you want to message me on LinkedIn, I will happily give you some companies to approach for neurodivergence
Thank you. I just have sent you an invite actually about 20 minutes ago. So I thought I need to hook up with this tribe.
Wonderful.
I relate to
link up with us all. Link up with us all. If anybody's got any questions from today, reach out to any of us on here. I'll also post a video follow-up from today. Get in touch with us all. And thank you so much for joining the questions. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Guys. Thanks for joining. Have a nice afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.